Welcome back. It's Beyond the Box Score. For those who don't know, this is an FFT becoming a staple where Jacob and I jump on, talk ball with you. And the idea here, if you're new to our show, is that we are looking to go beyond the box score, beyond those obvious stats. We're going to look at game film. We're going to look at advanced stats and metrics. And we're going to use that to try to give you an edge in your fantasy football leagues. So without further ado, Jacob, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm still alive in a handful of leagues. Had some crazy ones last night, come right down to the wire. How'd you finish up? How you looking?
So I discussed it on yesterday's episode. It was arguably the worst week of fantasy football playoffs of my life. 9 leagues. There was one that I did get lucky in.
Okay.
But kind of lucky because I had to bid all the rest of my free agent budget for Desmond Ridder. It's a 2 QB league, 14 team.
Yeah.
And then he's the reason I won because he had just enough points to give me. I won by 0.14. So it was a crazy lucky win. But now, as we head toward the next week, Derek Carr was my QB2. He's out. I had another quarterback who was injured. He's out. Desmond Ridder now looking unlikely to start with Aiden O'Connell trending up towards starting. And I have Wentz on the wire, but I can't claim him because there's no $0 bid. So I'm really in a nightmare scenario where I most likely will be going into the semifinals without a second quarterback. So that's my
Yeah, I've got one of those as well. Mahomes, David Montgomery, and Jalen Waddle. If they're all out, then it's like Christian Watson's my QB2.
Yeah, right. So it's going to be ugly. We'll see what happens. Maybe my opponent will be in a similar position, but we assume a lot of people listening right now are in these kind of similar situations. So today we wanted to do something a little different on Beyond the Box Score, a little 5-pack, we're calling it, a 5-pack of big topics. Within each topic that we're going to break down, there will be discussions of players, discussions of start sits potentially, discussions of where offenses are headed as we go into the fantasy semifinals and championship in the next 2 weeks. These are all designed to possibly give you the edge you need or just that final push toward which player you might start and might sit. So without further ado on that front, let's jump right into our first big topic. And our first big topic today is the Texans and Chiefs this Saturday, a little Saturday game. We don't really know right now, as we're recording this on Tuesday, what's going to happen at quarterback for the Chiefs, Jacob. I think the expectation is Carson Wentz will be the starter, but Andy Reid did say today that if Mahomes can go, he'll go. And Patrick Mahomes is pretty much one of those guys that is, I don't want to say, what's the word I'm looking for? He's notorious. But that's not the right word because I think notorious is a bad connotation. But he's basically notorious for being hurt, but somehow, some way, it's like the Paul Pierce thing when he gets wheeled off on the wheelchair and then somehow comes back in the second half. Somehow, some way, Mahomes ends up playing a lot of these. What are your expectations on this game, and where do you want to tackle this? If he will play, or as if he won't?
Yeah, so the Chiefs are only implied for 19 points this week per Vegas. Only the Giants, Patriots, and Saints are lower. So expectations from the betting market are definitely that we're going to see Carson Wentz. I want to start on the Texans side of the ball offensively and open up a discussion about CJ Stroud. I watched all of the film from this past week, and I've watched every route that Nico Collins has run since he's come back just because I'm obsessed with him. So I've got a fair bit of CJ Stroud over the past month. I did not watch much of the games before that. I know that the line has been really bad, and then I've done my best to keep up with The Athletic and Nate Tice and people like that who do watch as much of him as they can and talk about him. And it sounds like it's just been this progression from last year where it was a problem. The pressure was a problem. And then expectations were really high this year, but then the line has actually regressed and the pressure rate is even higher this year than it was last year. And Stroud has really kind of devolved into something that is uncharacteristic of what we've seen from him at the college level or as a pro. And so I wanted to just talk about that, contextualize it. And then if you want to look at film, I've got a cut up on Twitter. My pinned tweet right now is a Nico Collins tweet that will take you to it. 35% pressure rate last year. That was middle of the pack. 38% pressure rate this year. Doesn't sound like a big difference, but it is. That puts him as one of the most pressured quarterbacks. His time to pressure is down from 2.66 to 2.57. Again, doesn't sound like a big difference, but it really is that moment to not be able to set your feet or find your rhythm on these throws. And then also what I think is really coming into play here is watch CJ Stroud, and it's clear that like he's affected by this. He looks spooked, is the word that I've used. And I'm curious what you think about it before I dive into it. How much have you watched CJ Stroud this season?
So I saw the cut up you put on your Twitter, and then I took a chance. I took some time to go back and watch this specific game, and I've seen some CJ Stroud throughout. I haven't been able to do a full game on him yet. I think what you're saying is probably spot on, and there could be reasons for that. One could be the solutions that this offense found schematically last year are just not there right away on first read for them. And a lot of like that Shanahan principle offense, like obviously Bobby Slow comes from the Shanahan tree, or at least when it's working well, and you see this with Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins as well, and the 49ers, it's a lot of just hit your back foot and let it rip to that first read. But the issue being, and we've seen this in Miami this year, and now also with the Texans, is if you don't have your run game going within this scheme,
Mm-hmm.
which clearly the Texans do not have going.
Really fallen off.
That's the number one thing I've noticed watching them. This run game is a disaster right now. They are not creating that one cut and go lane for Joe Mixon at all. And it's the same thing that's going on with Miami and Devin Achane. When that's happening, it allows those defenses to play different. Like as I'm watching these dropbacks, I don't see, I mean, the linebackers are going to read their keys regardless, but I don't see a lot of urgency from the safety or like them dropping safeties or linebackers coming down to read run. And that's allowing them to play at a depth that's taking away these windows, or at least in CJ Stroud's mind, it's taking away these windows for him to throw into. And when you lose that confidence as a quarterback that I can test this throwing window and let it rip, and that's something he was doing all last year, right? Like we remember some things we praise him for. If we remember back to his rookie season, it's like, wow, he threw that window right there and he stuck that football in there. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that, by the way, now if you like juxtapose it to this season, we're praising Sam Darnold for, because he's playing with a crazy amount of confidence. And he's throwing it into those windows. Stroud is a little more hesitant to, and I think you did a good job breaking it down. There was one play to Nico where he really could let it rip at that second level, did not let it rip. Now you combine that all with the sped up clock, and that's the key thing that I think you touched on. He's really has, and we're talking split seconds here as far as his pressure and his pressure rate and getting rid of the football, but it makes a difference for him, and his clock is clearly sped up. That's something I noticed this week for the first time all year watching Justin Herbert. We'll get to more of that later, but that was so evident in the Chargers game with what Todd Bowles and the Bucs were able to do. So I think it's a possibility that part of the problem is the offensive line, which has led to a sped up clock. The biggest problem to me is that the run game, which is so important in this offense. And by the way, like every Shanahan offense, like relies on, the reason the run game works is because it relies on guys like Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua or Brandon Ayuk to be these unbelievable insert blockers. But like, who do the Texans have that are unbelievable blockers? I mean, Collins obviously has the frame for it, and he's a good blocker. But like when you have like a Tank Dell out there, it's going to impact your run game as well, in my opinion, at least. So I just think the pieces are not in place for this offense to get going this season. They're going to need to overhaul it a little bit. And CJ Stroud's going to have to play more confidently.
Yeah, it makes me really wary of using them. Obviously, you play Nico, but the rest of the Texans, even Mixon, I'm kind of nervous. Luckily, with Mixon, we're seeing way more checkdowns, which I think is the next the easy transition here. A good way to quantify what we're seeing in CJ Stroud and the change from last year to this year is that at the collegiate level, Stroud never checked down. His running back target rate was even lower than Anthony Richardson, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson. It was the lowest of anybody drafted over the past few years. And then last year, it was among the lowest. I think it was the second lowest in the league. This year, it's like right middle of the pack. And then I texted you this stat last night. On non-pressured dropbacks, he has almost doubled his check down rate from last year to this year.
Right.
And that rate was all the way up to 18%, which is double his season-long rate this year. It was 18% this past game. It was the highest it's been all year. So we're seeing it like it's not getting any better. It's like at the worst that it's ever been in terms of him like not being willing to like make the reads, make the progressions, or wait to throw with timing to one of his perimeter receivers as they break open, and instead just like almost immediately turning to the check down. The other guy,
that's the key right there, though. Just to unpack that a little bit, you think about the offense he played in Ohio State, the Ryan Day offense. You think about the offense he played in last year with Bobby Slowick, and just some of the things that you've seen from that tree. Outside of like having McCaffrey, who like you obviously design a passing game around to some extent, it's not an offense that should be going that like using the check down. And clearly, by the stat you brought up, these are a lot of the time him working too fast through his progression, not trusting what he's seeing, not having the confidence or the timing and anticipation, I guess, in that sense, to trust all of these routes to win, and then just saying, all right, I'll come to the check down, which is not really a good thing for anyone outside of Joe Mixon.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy who's really being affected by his line in the same way, and the metrics are almost identical, and we don't need to get into Miami, but I just thought it was interesting, is Tua.
Yeah.
Tua had almost the exact same rate as Stroud last year in terms of not checking down. He was one of the least likely to check down. And then this year, on non-pressured dropbacks, he's near the top of the league in terms of checking down. I think both those guys their lines are problems. They're playing in similar systems, and they don't seem to trust it right now. And so it's just like,
and kudos to also the NFL. Like when you watch these teams, like just thinking
Yeah.
about some of the things that I've seen throughout the year of teams facing this style offense, this system, it's like they're finding more solutions to what these guys are running in the passing game, and how to like play certain types of pattern match principles on the back end that are going to match the route combinations that they're expecting to come.
Yeah. So just real quick on Kansas City, I do think there's hope next week for the passing game against Baltimore. Baltimore has not been very good at creating pressure.
Hope with Wentz or hope with Mahomes?
No, hope with Houston. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Houston. We're flipping it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that because like this week is about as scary as it can get, because this is a team that gets pressure really fast. The Chiefs have the fastest time to pressure in terms of like they're blitzing all the time, and their guys are getting there faster than anybody else when they do get pressure. It's the fastest in the league. And so that's pretty scary. The other like key schematic note about the Chiefs defense is they use press coverage way, way more than any team in the NFL. 90%. No one else is above 80%. That's a Nico Collins note. Guess who leads the NFL in yards versus press coverage this year? It's Jamar Chase. It's not Nico Collins. He's only played 9 games. But Nico is third out of all players in yards versus press coverage, which is so crazy because he's missed 5 games.
Yeah.
He's averaging over 4 yards per out run, 4.25 yards per out run versus press coverage. The league average is 1.5. Jamar Chase's rate is 2.5. Nico's at 4.25. And if you throw in last year's data for a larger sample size, it's still over 4.2 on 240 routes. No one else is even above 3 yards per out run. So that will be really interesting. He still
That's a really interesting note.
He's insane, dude. He's so good.
Just the juxtaposition, because people are going to look at that like, oh, Nico against the Chiefs, this is a really bad spot for him. And it's like, maybe it actually is a great spot for him.
Just depends on if Stroud's able to, if it doesn't matter if he's just running down the field.
It'll be easier for him to see it, I think, against press.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, that's interesting. Another note I wanted to bring up on this defense is that they lost Jalen Watson like 2 months ago. He was their cornerback 2. They've got Trent McDuffie as their CB1. They've thrown a number of guys in there, but they've been getting banged up. The second most effective, the most effective of the fill-ins is Chamari Connor. He's concussed, so he's probably going to miss this game. So they're down to their third option here at the CB2 spot. And since that injury to Jalen Watson 2 months ago, they've allowed 9 yards per target to the left side of the field, up from 7. And they've allowed a 90% catchable target rate to that side of the field, up from 75%. 90% catchable target rate is absurd. And so that Nico is who spends more time on the left, but Trent McDuffie does move. I think he'll probably follow Nico Collins around. And so I think, to me, this is like, if you are desperate, there is hope for Tank Dell. He's gotten open there. You'll see if you look in that cut up, there are clips where he's open and he's like, what are we doing? Like getting frustrated. But I think that this is a spot that we've seen teams really attack, is like just go away from McDuffie and attack the second cornerback. So there is some hope for Tank Dell, although he does not have good splits against press coverage. So we'll see. I mostly wanted to get your thoughts on Stroud. On the Kansas City side of things, I guess I do want to give credit to Houston's defense, because I don't know if people realize how good they are statistically, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Texans. I think their offense has struggled so much to like sustain drives that often the defense gets put in tough situations. But on the year, the Texans are second in success rate, third in EPA defensively. They've allowed some explosive runs, but hardly any explosive passes. Only the Chiefs and the Vikings have a lower yard per running back rush allowed rate on runs up the middle, which I bring up because I think that's Kansas City's best chance to move the ball without Mahomes in a neutral matchup, is just to trust those interior linemen and try to run up the middle with Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, but the Texans have been really good at stuffing that. And really, they've just been good all around. So like I think that the best chance the Chiefs have is like try to get explosive catch and run plays with like Xavier Worthy and Pacheco. But honestly, yeah, I think the 19-point implied total is probably about right. Do you have any thoughts on how they might attack this defense?
It's interesting. I was trying to look up while you're talking just what they've done from a coverage scheme specific standpoint this year, because you're talking about them just
I think they're
eliminating.
pretty neutral.
Yeah, I couldn't find it in the time of doing that, but just from that idea of just avoiding explosives. I mean, this Chiefs offense doesn't really create explosives in the passing game with Mahomes, so I don't know if they're going to be able to do it with Carson Wentz. I have a feeling we're going to see an uber conservative game approach here from Andy Reid for as long as he's able to, and that'll kind of depend on, can CJ Stroud beat a defense that's willing to play more press and more man, which should, like you said, lead to some opportunities for Nico Collins. So I just ultimately have very low expectations, I guess, for scoring in this game, looking at these two teams offensively and where they're at.
I do think Worthy is interesting. I've highlighted him
Okay.
for, in the Monday show and also in the newsletter. Things are trending in the right direction for him from a usage standpoint. I think he's played better. And I think it makes a lot of sense that like he's the guy who can create with the ball in his hands, him and Pacheco, whereas a lot of these other guys, it's like throw him open. So that's, I think if he's kind of like in the same range as Tank Dell. If you have to throw in a desperation flex, I don't think he's a terrible option. So probably, I mean, he saw 12 targets basically last week. I think you could see double digits in this game.
Yeah, we'll see what happens on that front. I mean, Worthy, definitely a player who could be on the radar. Just hard to predict for me with Wentz how this offense is going to look. I think we are looking toward a Wentz game. Okay, second big topic we wanted to break down and touch on is, can we trust any, and I mean any, Chicago Bears this week against the Lions defense that I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jacob, had 3 more starters get injured on a team that's already has so many starters getting injured, that plays an insane amount of cover one and man, which is not necessarily a great thing in that regard. Where are you at with regards to, because we obviously just watched last night the Bears offense totally look inept against Brian Flores. He's done that before at other teams, but man, did it look bad. And man, Caleb, this is the crazy thing watching Caleb. He is just having such a bad rookie season from what I expected. Jacob, This is a prospect that has everything you could want in a prospect, but obviously had some bad habits at USC that I maybe overlooked as they carry over here from seeing the field. He just doesn't see the field well, in my opinion.
He needs a break. He needs to recoup.
He really does.
This season will be over soon for the Bears. Thank God. All I have really are just some data on the Bears since the offensive coordinator change. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about Detroit, because I think it could be a matchup that you could attack. Because they've lost so many guys and they still play super aggressively. Since the OC change, which was in week 11 on, we've got a 32% first read target rate for both Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. That is strong. Keenan Allen has really underwhelmed in terms of turning his expected fantasy points into actual fantasy points. Part of that is Caleb is not playing well. The offense is not playing well, but also he has 7 drops across like 4 or 5 games since the OC change. He's doing nothing after the catch. The volume is good. He's fine in PPR leagues. He played well against Detroit last time. It's been a team that you sometimes have been able to attack with slots more early in the season than lately. So you could go there if you need to in PPR, but I don't feel great about it. DJ Moore, he has an average depth of target of 5 yards since the OC change. In terms of his catchable targets, the average depth of target on those is 3. This past game, he had 8 targets and only 3 air yards. So, we've seen him under 50 yards in each of the past 2 games because of this role. He's good. He's good. He's really good with the ball in his hand, so he could make an explosive play. And if we do have, backups in, I think the injuries are mostly in the front 7, but if, they're shoddy tackling because of the backups, then maybe he does. But he definitely feels like a risky play to me. Could easily just have 5-6 points again. And then the last guy is Odunze. Hopefully you just can avoid him. But there is upside. He leads the team in end zone targets since the OC change. He has a decent first read target rate during that time, 23%. He's a big play option. The uncatchable target rate for him is crazy high. It's been really bad, the connection between him and Caleb. But there is the potential for him to come down with big plays if the Bears are able to produce anything like that. So what do we think about Detroit's defense?
Yeah, watching Detroit defense against the Bills on tape was a tough watch if you're a Lions fan. Obviously, there's a lot of issues here from an injury standpoint with the Lions. They still played 43% man coverage against the Bills, which I think, generally speaking, is very risky against a quarterback like Josh Allen. But this is a team that like lives in that, and they're gonna stick by what they live in, and that's a ton of cover one. Which again, and it's man coverage when you're in cover one, and that means just you have one safety over the top, middle of the field close, which means that you know, there's no split safety look, but so essentially you're putting a lot of pressure on that one safety in the deep half, though the Bills didn't really challenge them that much. But even so, they got just a 29% pressure rate with 0 sacks against the Bills. So clearly you should be expecting more pressure and more opportunities to get after the quarterback. If you're playing just one safety high, that's not something that's been happening, or at least didn't happen for the Lions. I felt like the biggest issues for them came in the run game, honestly. And I don't know how much of that I want to take away from the Lions, and rather just give credit where it's due to the Bills. And the game plan they had against the Lions. They did so many dynamic things in the running game that I hadn't seen, like power gap concepts that were just unbelievable. And some of the stuff, like where you'll see just like a misdirection play where you have it look like you're pulling 2 guys to the left, and James Cook takes the step to the left, and he has so much athleticism. He's able to just stop his momentum and break back to the right. Just like interesting misdirection concepts. And then just the ability, because you're playing a man team, where you can get a running back in these one-on-one matchups in the passing game, which is something the Bills did. Will the Bears be able to do that? No, probably not. We haven't seen that with DeAndre Swift all year. I think this offense is so poorly designed for Caleb Williams' skill set. It's making him try to become like a middle of the field winner, somebody who anticipates and throws well over the middle field. Can he do that at some point in his career? Maybe, yeah. But honestly, like when I just watched those teams back to back, the Chargers offense and the Bears offense. I'm like, why don't the Bears just run a similar type of offense with a lot of outbreaking routes to utilize Caleb's unbelievable arm talent? Like, let him throw outbreaking rips in the intermediate range to DJ Moore, to whoever, not even Keenan Allen, Romo Dunze, guys that can win in those spots. And they're just not doing that. So for what the Lions run, I don't think there's going to be too much concern that the Bears are going to be able to take advantage of it. Personally, the Bears run game is completely broken. So one area the Bills beat the Lions is there. And then 2, utilizing those running backs in the passing game, finding those matchups in man coverage, linebacker versus a running back in the passing game, just not something the Bears have proven they can do. And I doubt they're going to be able to install it for this week. So I don't have much trust in DJ Moore. I don't have much trust in Keenan Allen. Look, against a team that's going to play cover one, there should be opportunities, but right now it's hard for me to trust this Bears offense.
I kind of feel like DeAndre Swift might have a good game here, revenge game.
He should.
Yeah, I don't know how many people who are still alive at the playoffs care about DeAndre Swift, but
I don't think he will, but I think it sets up for him to.
yeah, the usage was really good this past week. Yeah, I think they are just like hoping to just grind it out on the ground and get to the end of the year. I don't know why they aren't throwing him the ball. He only has 1 target in each of the past 2 games. But yeah, he was, in terms of XFP, expected fantasy points, he was RB9 in week 15.
Yeah. Anything else on this matchup before we move to a couple tough spots that are going to be for managers listening, players who have done them right at the position, but we may be thinking they might do them wrong in the fantasy semifinals. Anything else before we get there?
I don't think so. We'll talk about the receivers more at the end here. We're
Okay.
going to do some like this guy or this guy, kind of look at those guys.
Well, then let's get to one of these backs, and it's Rico Dowdle against the Buccaneers. So I have a lot to say on this, having just watched that Buccaneers defense on tape. But I know you have a lot to say on Rico Dowdle. So let's get to that, and then we'll come together. We'll discuss it all, Jacob, and we'll come to a decision. Can we trust this guy in the fantasy semifinals?
The usage is great. He also is not getting any targets, but his route rate continues to go up. It was one of the highest at the running back position last week. And then also Rico has just been mauling defenses. I think it's really important to bring up that the defenses he's faced are the Giants, the Bengals, and the Panthers. So his avoided tackles have come way up lately, and that's uncharacteristic for Dowdle. I went back and watched this past game. I know you've watched some of Rico as well. Do you think he's doing much of anything to force missed tackles other than running hard, which is obviously a good trait? But I do wonder if the recent rise in missed forced tackles is more of a poor tackling stat.
I would say it's more likely the latter in the teams they've faced.
Yeah. But still, we do need to give him credit. So he had 25 carries this past week, gained positive yardage on every single one of them.
Wow.
Gained 3 or more yards on all but one of them, so that's 96%. The next highest rate for any running back with 25 or more carries in a game this year is 86%. Only 2 people have been above 80% on the year in a game. That's Kamara and Joe Mixon. His was at 96%. So it's crazy, like how consistently he's just turning out yards. And when you watch him, there's not much spectacular. He just wears defenses down. So what do we think against the Bucs? Because the Bucs have been stout against some teams, but overall are on paper not a great defense.
Bucs are definitely not a great defense on paper, but on tape, at least from the game I just watched, they looked unbelievable. They won that game against the Chargers because they were able to dominate the line of scrimmage, specifically on the interior defensive line. That was where everything stopped for the Chargers. And it's really what led to, in a lot of spots, in my mind at least, the reason they ended up losing that game, because they had to become one-dimensional in the passing game. And it really was limiting to that offense. And I think what you're seeing is a lot of wins up front from those interior defensive linemen in Tampa. Now it's going to be an interesting matchup because Dallas obviously has a really good interior offensive line. And I think in the Chargers game at some point, Zion, I don't know why I'm blanking on his last name. Zion Johnson, their interior left guard. I almost called him Zion Williamson. I was thinking of that. Was injured and had to come out. So the Chargers were down a starting offensive lineman there. And the Cowboys obviously have a strong interior. But it'll be a good matchup. I'm concerned, I think, for Dowdle, to say the least, because of two things. One, that, and two, on the other side of the ball, Baker's just clicking in the passing game with Mike Evans to such a crazy degree. Like, that was so fun to watch. That's the best rapport I saw all week between a quarterback and a wide receiver. And Evans is so good at football. He's winning quick game. He can win you right away with the slant or those quick outbreakers, or he can win you on the intermediate level. And then he'll lull you to sleep, because if you think he's just doing outbreakers, inbreakers, boom, he turns one out and up and then turns to a skinny post, and it's like Baker just rips it out there for a touchdown. So right now, I don't think they're very stoppable, which is going to put even more pressure on the Cowboys to kind of change their game script up, maybe go away from Dowdle early. They'll start there, but I do think Tampa is going to have some success there, interior defensive line wise, stopping Dowdle. He's not someone I would be trusting that much, and I don't really love his role in the passing game either.
That's kind of how I felt when I watched Tampa Bay. Is like Dowdle, he runs more inside zone than any team, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to just run over this Bucs
That's
defense.
not where you want to run on the defense. Like the few
Yeah,
times the
you're running
Chargers
into Vita Vea.
yeah, exactly. The few times when I watched on tape the Chargers kind of win up front, offensive line wise, I'll say, and I say that clearly I'll tell you in a second why, was when they tried different kind of things like pulling guys and going more outside runs. And on those runs, every single time Gus Edwards looked unbelievably bad, picking the wrong spots, not sudden to the hole, not making one cut, plant and go, not missing tackles. Like the Chargers have to immediately pull Gus Edwards from any kind of role, which it kind of looks like they're starting to do. That's a side note.
Kamani Vidal actually played more than him in the first quarter. He was in for the third play on the first drive. Like it was a real role. It wasn't just a blowout. That wasn't the only reason he outsnapped.
There are times, Jacob, like, and mostly I lean on this, that a running game is made by the blocking scheme and the offensive line, and I am a big believer in that. And there are times where that is not the case, and a running back will either propel or hold back a run game. And I really do believe, just from watching this one game, I don't know if that's the case of all their games, but Gus Edwards really held back the Chargers.
Mm-hmm. So the last thing I will say on Rico, we'll get into rankings later, but this is a really appealing game environment on a week where there aren't hardly any. So the over-under in this game is 48.5. The only one that's higher on the week is the Bengals versus Browns, which will, I would guess, get bet down now that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is in for Jameis Winston. So you're looking at probably the highest over-under of the week. The Cowboys are 3.5-point underdogs, 22.5.
That's crazy.
Implied total is decent. Yeah, it's just a gross week. So I think
for the fantasy semis.
I think that like the game could be good enough back and forth. Dallas's offense is playing well enough that there's a decent chance he'll get a touchdown from Dowdle with a handful of yards as well. But like he really needs to do something in the passing game. So we'll get into rankings more in detail later. I want to talk about Brian Robinson. I think is a guy you could honestly consider moving ahead of him. He's seeing a similar type of workload where it's just a ton of rushing attempts, a lot of inside zone type of stuff. So not huge explosive potential, but a lot of just chain moving stuff. He's just grinding it out. He's got a good chance to fall into the end zone at any given time, but he has a much more difficult matchup going against the Eagles. Washington's playing at home. I actually thought this game would have one of the highest over-unders on the week, but it's surprisingly low. It's 46.5. and the Commanders are only implied for 21.5 points. So that's fewer than Dallas. 3.5 point underdogs. So a lot of respect given to Philly's defense, which is warranted, of course. But man, I thought Washington looked really good. I watched their full game in Week 15, and that was really, really fun. Jaden's playing really well. Jaden took a ton of hits in that game, though. That was
Yeah.
scaring the crap out of me. It's like, what are we? We're doing? We're playing the Saints. Come on, guys. Anyway, do you have any thoughts on Brian Robinson? I did watch all of his carries. If you don't, if you just want me to talk about him,
I'm going to turn it to you as far as the game, what the game tape shows. But from what I've read about the game and just looking at some of True Media's stats on how the Saints played this game, I think that it should be a better spot for Robinson against Philly, which seems counterintuitive given how bad the Saints have been against the run prior to last week. The Saints really did a lot to sell out to stop the Washington run game in this game from a schematic standpoint. That's not something we're going to see from Philly. Like Vic Fangio is playing his style defense, I think, at this point of the season and relying on that system to work, which it has, honestly. Like they're playing so well together. I don't see why he would change that. So that would be my one take, that I just feel like it could be a better spot schematically for Robinson, as surprising as that may seem.
please go into more detail on that. I'm really curious what you mean.
Just the way that Fangio plays his style defense, right? Like it's that top-down defense. He's going to be in a lot of non-man looks, and I don't think he's going to be doing a lot of. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I would imagine they're not going to be rotating the safety down a lot to make plays in the run game. Like just going to rely on stopping the run by being, gown sapped, things like that.
Okay. And why do you think that's a better
spot for him?
Fit for Washington specifically? Yeah.
Just because of I saw a little bit of the Saints-Washington game, obviously, on broadcast, and I felt like there were a lot of situations where the Saints were selling out to stop the run.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
You're
it's conjecture. It may not be what ends up happening. Like the Eagles could have a very aggressive game plan against Washington. It's not like I've never seen Fangio have aggressive game plans. Like against the Giants earlier this year, he aggressively sold out to stop the run.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little different because like when you're selling out and you have like your DBs sitting on the routes that break back and driving down on underneath stuff, it works in conjunction, but like you can't really do that against Washington because they'll just burn you with an over-the-top throw to like a Terry McLaurin. So I think he's going to have to play a little bit more off in this game.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think, I think the passing game and the deep passing specifically is what's going to be the point of emphasis, especially McLaurin was just torching New Orleans last week and has been playing really well lately. Yeah. So what about like the way, I'm curious to pick your mind on this, like the Commanders have been doing a lot more pin pull stuff lately, where they've got Jaden running to the edge, or they've got Brian Robinson. They even had one where they like motioned him in from the slot and he took it and he's attacking the edge. They also do a ton of inside zone, of course, but like they've been kind of doing some more creative stuff like that lately. Do you think that like a defense like Vic Fangio that's like sitting back is better equipped to deal with that kind of?
I want to be clear. He's not like sitting. It's not sitting back. It's just like the style of defense zone with a lot of cover three. So it's like sitting back is probably not the right word because they play aggressively and they drive down and they got their eyes on the quarterback at all times and they're ready to break. But as far as like versus pin pull, that I would say is more dependent, not necessarily on the second and third levels, just on how the defensive line plays. Like, are they an aggressive line that's trying to penetrate and get upfield to stop those kind of like you can stop maybe power gap from the backside if you're that type of defense, right? You have your like D linemen shooting gaps. As far as what the Eagles do from that standpoint, I can't say I'm too knowledgeable on that. I haven't watched enough Eagles tape to know how their defensive line is kind of shooting, but like I would assume they're playing pretty well, like just from what I've seen from Zach Bond. In the run game, they're inside backer, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, maybe not quite as scary of a matchup as you might think. The Eagles are a really interesting defense. Their blitz rate is just like way down. I do think, he might be able to kind of just like chew up yards here and there, gains of 3, 4, 5, and they're just kind of like, okay, like
that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm
meet you at the red zone.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's move on to our last topic here: Chargers and Broncos.
All right, Chargers, Broncos. So we want to discuss here on this one kind of just the entire we're looking ahead and we're discussing what we've seen. So I'll say just from having watched Chargers tape of this week, that defense is in a really, really bad spot. So I'm going right now to find it in my notes. So Chargers defense, they allowed 5.7 yards per carry against the Bucs, 9 rushing first downs. They had a pressure on just 31.9% of dropbacks, 2 quarterback hits. They lived in sub package, just all nickel and dime, was a really interesting way to try to stop the run. It did not work. There were so many miscues on the defense side of the ball. So the first McMillan touchdown, switch release, you could see the Chargers DBs caught up trying to get through. And this was really a good play by Baker Mayfield, because the safety rotated from at the start of the snap. It was a too high look, and the safety from the left hash came down, dropped into the box, and the safety from the right hash rotated to the middle of the field. And Baker just read that, because immediately when he snaps the ball, you could see that he knows, because the switch release that's happening on the left side of the formation to create that little wheel route touchdown to McMillan. At the snap, it looks like he's going to have safety help over the top, and it's not going to be available. But he reads that safety rotating to the middle of the field close, and he just throws the ball with anticipation. Just a good read pre to post from Baker. I'm not sure if that's something that he saw in film review that the Chargers gave away. I would imagine it was. But then outside of that, there were other issues here. There was like where the one I have in my notes was like an 18-yarder run to Bucky Irving. So Buck started the second half with 3 straight successful runs. It was 5, 6, and 18 yards of Bucky Irving. On the 18-yarder, you had an alignment where the Chargers had 2 down linemen and their edges were stand-up linebackers, and you had a stacked backer behind that edge. And both of them go inside. The edge guy makes a swim move to try to get inside, and the stack backer behind him commits inside, and they just give up contain. And Bucky Irving just runs through a wide open contain. So I was like, what's going on there? That was a weird communication issue. On the Evans touchdown, the first one, you see it's like you see the far hash safety call to the deep post to try to like have the wide receivers kind of running the clear out toward the right hash. He's like making a call, and then 3 Chargers defenders all go with that, leaving Mike Evans wide open running across the middle. He makes the catch, and the Chargers safety makes a horrible tackle attempt, and then he goes like another 20, 30 yards after the catch for a touchdown. Same thing on the second touchdown. It was kind of just a weird error, I think I would just call it, from the defense, where the far hash safety on that side of the field, Evans running like a skinny post there, and you have that safety committing to the flat, like taking a step down as Evans runs that vertical route, committing to the flat responsibility. But you also have the linebacker, the middle linebacker, I think it's number 7 for LAC, committing to the same flat responsibility. So you're like, why are they both committing to that? All it leads to is Evans have the ability to run free to that post in a one-on-one and another touchdown for the Bucs. So just a ton of communication errors for the Chargers. I just don't think they're playing really well as a defense right now. That's my main takeaway from watching them, which gets me really, really excited potentially about the Broncos and Bo Nix, because the person who can take advantage of that is Sean Payton. I can see it happening right away in this game. And I don't know, I haven't followed it. Is it injuries with the Chargers on the defense side of the ball, like why they're not playing well together right now? But that was just surprising to see that many breakdowns communication-wise.
I was going to ask you if they lost players in this game, because otherwise they're mostly healthy. Denzel Perryman, linebacker, is out. Khalil Mack is back, though. But he only played half the snaps in this game, so I wondered if he got hurt. I didn't see anything about it. Joey Bosa is back.
I didn't see it, but like, I mean, they're getting chewed up in the run game. Like I said, 9 rushing first downs, 5.7 yards per carry. So it's like, all right. But you watch them, they're mostly just playing nickel and dimes. And I guess that's by design, but it's hard to stop the run in nickel and dime when you're also on the back end having so many communication errors. Like straight up, all of those touchdowns I broke down were just really weird communication issues on the defense side of the ball.
Liam Cohen, baby.
Yeah. I don't think it's that as much as just.
I don't know. I thought I loved what I saw from Tampa Bay in this game.
No, but not to take anything away. Liam Cohen's like best in the game right now.
The Chargers, they got put through the gauntlet here. They had a really easy schedule at the beginning of the year, but then they had a month-long stretch where they were going to get tested, and they kind of failed. It looks like failed the test. Gave up 30 to Baltimore, 34 to Cincinnati, 40 to Tampa Bay. They played well against the Chiefs and the Falcons, but those offenses are kind of reeling. So, interesting spot here for Denver. The Broncos are implied for only 20 points, though, which is hard to believe. That can't be right.
It's probably just based on what the Chargers were earlier this year.
Yeah, but Vegas is sharp. Like, that really surprises me, especially they're often sort of reactive, like coming off of that week we just had.
Part of it could also be just like a lack of faith in the Chargers offense, right? Like the Chargers offense was really, really bad in this game. Let's take a look at the Bucs allowed just 206 yards of total offense all game, 2.9 yards per rush, a long of 8 yards rushing for the Chargers offense with 1 rushing first down the entire game. The Chargers converted 0%. They didn't convert a single third or fourth down in the entire game. And that's with the Bucs basically just playing cover 3 for most of the game and getting 55.6% pressure on the snaps, 9 quarterback hits. Again, when you can play nickel or dime, like in most of your plays, 40 of 48 plays were in sub package, nickel or dime, and you're playing a lot of covers 3, and you're still able to get that kind of pressure. Now, maybe that's giving credit to the Bucs, I guess, but I feel like the Broncos have proven to us that they can do something very similar with Nick Bonito and all the players they've got there. Like, this could be a really, really bad spot for the Chargers offense.
Yeah, I do feel like for the Bucs, Todd Bowles has been really locked in lately. There are a lot of plays where the Chargers line were just not getting. There were people blocking no one on these blitzes and everything. But yeah, let's talk about the Chargers then. I was surprised to see that they were 3-point favorites in this one, which means Vegas views these teams as basically equal.
Right.
And given the way, because they're playing in LA and 3 points is generally what you give for home field advantage, is why I say that. So like that surprised me just because Denver has the best defense in the league, is playing well. Bo Nix just turned the ball over a lot in the last game, but I thought otherwise it wasn't a huge red flag kind of game. Whereas the Chargers, I feel like, are presenting red flags on offense and defense.
Oh, yeah.
So why don't you talk about what you saw from LA on offense?
Yeah, so that I touched a little bit on it just now with like some of what they were able to, unable to do, I should say. I mean, for me, the biggest thing. I'm sorry.
I said, and you hit on the run game. We've actually kind of talked about them a lot throughout this discussion.
Yeah, we have, but like, just to add a little bit more, I just thought Herbert was off target on throws he's not typically off target on, specifically outbreaking routes. I had in my notes, and what you said before about Stroud, first time kind of all season I saw this, but his clock was sped up, Herbert. Like there were times where he got rid of the football earlier than he had to, because he anticipated pressure, some of which was there, some of wasn't, and then it led to like the final really series that decided this game was the 3rd and 6 and the 4th and 6 with the Chargers around like the 34-yard line of the Bucs, and they still had a chance to come back in the game at that point. I think it was like 27-17 or something like that. The 3rd and 6, Herbert throws inside on an outbreaker that Ladd wins really easy. It could have been a touchdown.
Dude, that could have been like a 40, 50-yard touchdown. Yeah. He could have caught it still and maybe even still scored, but it was not a good throw.
No, he wouldn't have scored if he caught that throw. That throw was way too inside and behind him. Like, he needs to lead them toward the sideline, which he's been great at doing. That's the weird thing. Like, he starts the game off with 2 straight awesome throws. The first play, tight split out of shotgun, out route to McConkey. Throws that with anticipation. Perfect. Second play, McConkey's lined up in the slot. He runs the 6 slant where he plants his foot, cuts sharply. I think you put it on Twitter as well. Creates easy separation, easy win slant. And it's like, all right, Herbert looks good. And then just as the game went on, kudos to Todd Bowles and the Bucs. Like I said, 55.6% pressure rate on that's crazy high. It's like he just kind of threw him off. So that 3rd and 6 and then 4th and 6 was weird. Like they ran like a whip route with Ladd, and he's late to throw the whip route, but like he shouldn't even be late. Palmer's out route is probably better because even if he hits this whip route, he's like 3 yards short of the sticks and might get tackled because there's not a lot of space. So I just felt like it was off. And I think kind of what you said could just be true. Like this Chargers defense, I think could be really bad. We'll see what happens there. I don't know if it's an injury thing. They just look so bad against the Bucs. Like when I say like those things, like I'm breaking down those plays earlier, Jacob, where you had those breakdowns that led to all 3 of those huge plays. That's the type of shit I only see. Excuse my language. Wow.
You're about to talk about the Giants? Is that why it gets so worked up?
Right. That's the type of stuff I only see when I watch Shane Bones' Giants defense. So,
watch the Falcons.
Yeah, and maybe I got to watch more Falcon for that as well. Like those types of breakdowns this time of year, it's either due to injuries and in a complicated scheme, or it's just due to other factors. But I'm with you. I would say that's trending down. Both sides of the ball, I think, are trending down, especially if Zion Johnson isn't able to play for the Chargers.
Yeah, that's my main takeaway watching the Chargers is the interior line is so bad, and that's been a problem all year. But the tackles were kind of getting abused in this game too, and it's like, oh no, like we are in big trouble here. This is not going to work.
The Broncos can get pressure.
Yeah, for sure. I've got some interesting notes on Justin Herbert. I'm curious what you think about this because you've watched him a lot this year. His time to throw is way up, and it makes sense. It's a different scheme. They're not having him get the ball out as quickly and as many short throws as before. His average depth of target is much higher this year as well, which is cool. I've his whole career been like hoping that we could see this guy really like just blow the cannons out because he's got like the art to make any throw. But yeah, his average time to throw is 3 seconds, which is really high. That's one of the highest in the league. And then his sack to pressure ratio, which is another thing that we look at. It's an important stat. what percentage of the times the quarterback is getting pressured do they take a sack, is the fourth highest in the league. Will Levis, Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield, and then Herbert at 25%. And part of that is he's improvising more than he's ever been allowed to in the past. And I also think part of it is he's been hurt at times. Like at the beginning of the year, he wasn't as mobile as when he's like optimally running. And then like over the last few weeks, he's been banged up too. But I was curious if you had any thoughts on that from watching Herbert. Just like you talked about his clock getting sped up. He's wanting the clock to be longer than it's ever been before. And I wonder if that, especially with the receivers that he has, just like, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know how much of this, like, he looked a lot different in this game than he has all year. And I don't know how much of that is going to be something that we're going to see going forward, or just like specific to this game with Todd Bowles and what he was able to do and what the Bucs were able to do and what he's able to see and trust. I would actually lean toward he can get back on track. I just don't necessarily think this Broncos matchup is the one for him to do it in.
Yeah, that's fair. Man, every time, and this is just wish casting, but like every time I watch the Chargers lately, I'm like, they need T. Higgins so bad. That
They
would help
really
this
do.
offense so much. I really don't think Quinn Johnson is a bad player. He leaves so much on the bone, so much meat on the bone. Like he had another one on this one where Herbert avoided pressure, threw deep, had him, and it just like goes right through his hands. It was a tough catch, but it would have been such a huge catch. And it's just like, there's too many of these plays, man. But if he wasn't trusted to like make big plays all the time, if he could just continue to progress, he's really good with the ball in his hands.
I think I agree with that. He's not a complete receiver. I think the
No,
biggest issue from what I see with the Chargers right now, and this is what scares me about them getting back on track, is less so Herbert and maybe him playing hurt and sped up clock, which I think could just be because of the specific to this game. It's the two things. It's what we mentioned earlier. It's the interior offensive line and it's the run game, because they're still a team, like a Greg Roman team. Like you still see them so many times when you watch them on tape, just like get tight, bring in the heavy personnel, and line up under center. And then boom, they'll spark like a play action shot to Stone Smart, like on the out route, where you're just like, oh, Herbert's utilizing that.
that was an amazing throw.
Yeah, sick throw. But like it's not going to work when like you line up in that heavy personnel and you're going to run a lot, and then you get Gus Edwards back there who's really struggling right now. In addition to the issues they have on the interior offensive line, like it made them go so one dimensional. It made them start to get into gun spread looks that just I don't think they have the personnel at receiver to really hold up doing so.
Yeah. All right, we covered 5 topics, about 10 minutes each. Do you want to get into some start sit stuff? How do you want to end here?
Let's do it quick because we could have a chance
Okay.
to actually get our first show in at a reasonable rate here, which I think would be a fair. I know some listeners have told me, are not really listeners, but like the objective is to try to keep it a smooth, tight product.
No,
We try to
basically
be
all the listeners are like, please go longer. Please
yeah,
go much longer.
yeah, but
All
we
right.
want to keep it a tight product. So let's hit some start sits and then let's wrap there.
Juwan Jennings against the Miami Dolphins or Tyreek Hill against the 49ers?
I'm going to take Tyreek Hill against the 49ers in this matchup. I am probably less bullish on the Jennings situation than most just based on the matchup. But I will say, obviously, the weather will play a bigger factor here and help the Niners get back on track. Where are you at on that one?
What are you talking about with weather? You're just saying
the weather in the last game, I'm saying.
Yeah, I got you.
Really did impact Jennings. Like, it's clear Purdy wasn't throwing the ball well in the first half.
I got you. I've got Tyreek one spot higher. So Juwan Jennings or Drake London? I have him one spot lower. I think the Falcons we saw clearly him on Monday, just want to lean on the ground game, and they could probably do it against the Giants.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much reason for the Falcons to throw. I think I would go Jennings in that.
Jennings or Terry McLaurin against the Eagles?
I wonder if they'll give him Kenyon Mitchell treatment.
He got blanked last time. It was bad.
Right.
Well, he didn't get blanked, but he got blanketed. He got
I'll go Jennings.
one catch.
Yeah,
one catch for 10 yards.
It's a scary spot. I'll go Jennings. And I don't think the Eagles are going to play. Like, part of what McLaurin's appeal was last week is the way that the Saints played defense schematically. I don't think the Eagles are going to play similar, so I'll go with Jennings.
Juwan Jennings or Malik Neighbors against the Falcons?
It's crazy to say, but if Tim Boyle starts for the Giants, I have more faith in Malik Neighbors than anyone else, and Tim Boyle might start. So give me Neighbors in that one. I mean, the guy's getting like 13 targets a game.
Yeah, for sure. He could make some explosive plays against this defense. We'll see. I do have Jennings ahead of London, McLaurin, and Neighbors, but they're all directly behind him.
Okay.
All right, Jerry Jeudy. Looks like no Jameis Winston for this one, but he is facing the Cincinnati Bengals. Everything has been great for Jeudy, underlying usage going up. He's played really well. He's really fast. He might be able to just make these guys miss, create a big play out of nothing. But I do not trust DTR. So let's get a temperature check on Judy. I know you've been bullish on him. Jerry Judy or Jacoby Myers. Don't worry about that. We don't know if Aiden O'Connell's in or not. Jerry Judy or Khalil Shakir.
Oh, Shakir, without a doubt. I'm basically I'll just cut these off now. I won't be starting Judy in any league whatsoever. I won't be starting single Brown. I think.
What about Josh Downs against the Tennessee Titans?
Give me Downs. I think Dorian Thompson is going to just a bold take, but I think he's going to nuke this entire passing game.
Okay, then it's time to talk about the Bears. Keenan Allen,
the Bengals, by the way.
Keenan Allen and DJ Moore over Judy.
Sure, I have no interest. I won't start Judy anywhere.
Okay,
there's no scenario where I will be putting him in my lineup. I have no faith. What's going to happen? DTR is not going to move this football through the air. Like, you're taking away the whole reason Judy was able to break out and just putting in somebody who doesn't have arm talent.
Yeah, I don't know. Throw him a screen. He might score a touchdown. Who knows?
I guess.
I just think he's a good player. I mean, like, I don't think
he is a good player.
That much different than Malik Neighbors.
That I would have to not be too thrilled about Monday. Not an argument for today, but like Neighbors is a much stronger player than Jerry Judy, I think.
I think it's fair to be really worried about Judy. So where I've got him is after Josh Downs, after Jacoby Myers, and after Marvin Harrison Jr., and just ahead of the Bears receivers, ahead of DK Metcalf. His first retarget rate came way down. Metcalf, they've been trying to force him the ball. It hasn't been working.
Howell time, possibly.
Yeah. Jaden Reed, Jamison Williams, just ahead of those guys. Ahead of Xavier Worthy, who I'm actually pretty high on this week. All right, do you want to wrap? We're over 50. Do we just keep rolling?
No, we can wrap there. Yeah, we broke the 50 minute mark. Thank you so much for tuning in. I didn't ask at the top of the show. Please hit that like button. Help us grow. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you soon.